because as you see and as we discussed this morning already, I think it's clear that although we are, well, thinking about how to use the prototype for some sort of product, of course, each and every case we clearly said that somehow the idea of a network of knowledge is somehow broader, and that it's really about building a community of interest. And this is what we thought also we should tackle in the afternoon session. So, but before coming to that, I have one final announcement. We heard something about the demonstration cases very nicely, I think, also seeing the flexibility and the diversity of them. And we have two of them. The red ones will have the workshops starting tomorrow, and we'll have another workshop actually, which was, well, actually triggered by colleagues from the Commission knowing that our project here is going on, and on the other hand, working on this implementation of mapping and assessing ecosystem services in Europe. So they asked us when we had the client dialogue group meeting with them some time ago, couldn't we have here in back-to-back with our workshop, a workshop inviting scientists working on ecosystem services to exchange with us on how the scientific projects on ecosystem services could contribute to this mapping exercise. So tomorrow we will have, if you like, out of a sudden request-driven question from DG Environment, an additional workshop where just for, if you like, a scoping exercise between the scientific community and the policy community, we will have this workshop of mutual, well, understanding of what the needs are. And probably this could be something like a forced demonstration case later on, just showing you that these elements could already be up and running if the interest from both sides is there, because actually we were quite surprised that we had 20 people. I think some of you are already here, all with the blue dots, I think, that there are so many projects who are interested in joining this up, and you see that there can really be a mutual interest in these things. So coming back to the community of interest idea, so developing a continuous exchange base. This is really just some ideas for discussion with you. And I will invite some of the colleagues from existing initiatives and networks that we have mentioned already several times here also to come forward in between and just make say a few words on their initiatives. So when we are thinking about, as we said, we have discussed already these two parts down below, the prototype idea and the development of a governance structure. But we haven't discussed this providing a general platform for exchange and mutual learning between different groups and within the scientific community. So this is the thing I want to discuss, and hopefully we have some interest from you to discuss this in the breakout groups. So what are the needs for that? What would a community of interest look like? This is a technical term, but I will explain what it means. And then looking at existing initiatives and elements, actually discussion points that we might raise this afternoon. So basically what we understand as a community of interest is a technical term which has been developing in sociology to some extent, which is a community of people defined by their collective concern with the resolution of a problem. So it's our collective concern about loss of biodiversity and safeguarding ecosystem services, if you like, bringing together stakeholders from different community of practice. Community of practice are communities which are already working jointly on something. And I think we have quite a lot of these communities working more on the policy and practice side and working more on the science side. And this is what I want to illustrate with you and illustrate the change. And reaching a common understanding is actually this problem, and this expert describes this problem that we have in understanding each other as a synergy of ignorance, in a sense that we are talking about the same thing, but somehow we are ignoring the interest behind that from the other side. So the needs, actually also coming back to the work we have been doing in our project, from the different groups that we had identified in our mapping, from the client side, from briefers and from digesters. Of course, by briefers, they need direct context for specific questions. It's very straightforward. But for the digesters, they would like to have this one-stop shop for all information, which at the moment might be Google for them, but which should certainly be something else. Clear organization of knowledge they're asking for, indication of quality of knowledge is also important for them, etc. And for the implementers, we know that where they need guidance for specific problems, hopefully very often in the short term and not waiting for a long process of analyzing. They want to know, did someone solve the problem I just have right now somewhere else in Europe already, and I don't need to invest in another consultancy contract to solve it? Or well, they need probably also guidance for strategy. This is an example, for example, with the projects on the biodiversity strategy for 2020. So they're quite different. But also, of course, from the science perspective, we want to ensure our acknowledgements, and on the other hand, we want to have a process where there's low investment in terms that I can easily make the linkages to these people, where I can easily help without, well, writing big papers, reading big papers or whatever. And this is the challenge that the needs that we have. So the question I had for myself is, so what is the community of interest on biodiversity and ecosystem services? We have a very good collaboration with, cross disciplines in the natural science. So for quite some years, the term biodiversity was responsible for that to some extent. We have still some collaboration between natural and social sciences, can still be developed. We have a mutual understanding and collaboration with practice also. Well, this sometimes works and sometimes doesn't work, and this is what the NOC is for, to support this as well. On the other hand, we have continuously new topics which foster us to some extent for further integration. I think the ecosystem services concept over the last years is exactly one of these boundary concepts, as we call it, which really fosters us to really, even if we are feeling we are still need to better network in the biodiversity core areas, we still have to reach out already because society wants it. And on the other hand, we have also the development of use of specific IT tools for science, but less for integration. And this is the question where also with some of the questions about the NOC might raise in the future. So we still have some things to do when it comes to community of interest. But first and most importantly, I think we should be very clear that we have many communities of practice and communities of interest already there. And this is just a number of examples, which is surely not exhaustive, which I personally just said, oh, this will be ones I want to introduce, and I will ask some of the colleagues here actually to introduce them because they are working on them. They can do it much better. But also they are coming from the practice side, as you see, like BiSE, like the Biodiversity Indicator Partnership, like Eye on Earth, but also from the science side. So first of all, the practice side. I'd asked to Rania Spirapoulou from EAA to join us here. Unfortunately, she can't come because she's responsible for BiSE. Most of you will know it. It's the Biodiversity Information System in Europe. It has been set up in 2010. It's still under development very strongly. They have different elements in there. Of course, first of all, they want to serve policy, so they have different topics that they are changing. But they also, for example, have a side on research, if you look at the website. And this is from our perspective, it's very thin, because it just makes a few references to the FP projects and so on. And of course, we could think just within this room, there would be a huge amount of projects which could be linked there, but which are simply not there yet. And we have to think about how to link up with these elements. They have, of course, a main point on the EU 2020 targets. And they have, so this is the main thing, and they have the European perspective, they have, of course, biodiversity, and it's an information system. So, of course, they have a different target. It's not a network of knowledge, it's basically an information storage system. And this is actually intended to be the system that these briefers, for example, are looking for. They're saying, oh, well, we want to have this one-stop shop, and probably this information system could it be. But, of course, for a network of knowledge and for a community of practice, we can think about how to link up with such a system. Another system which has been developing also by EEA, and I hope that Jackie McLeod, who's joining us tomorrow morning, will also say a little bit more about this, is Eye on Earth, which is also something which has been developing across the world with many partners about, well, also making scientific knowledge available, but also inviting really citizens to get engaged in environmental monitoring, citizen science, etc. But this is a very practical different process. Another project I think which is very relevant on a global level and which is still developing now with the 2020 targets is the Biodiversity Indicator Partnership with scientific as well as practice NGOs, institutions joined together to really set up the main set of global biodiversity indicators, and they now are continuing to work on the 2020 indicators. And these are really nice examples where so different communities already come together to come for some solution from the practice side. But then, of course, we have from the other science side also some, which includes LifeWatch and GBIF, and that's the first point where I give the word to Olaf. He will say a few additional words to that.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to have some brief moment to come in from, I think, what's called the science infrastructure perspective. If you look at this slide, I know it's unclear at this point in time whether KNEU is actually contributing to IPBES, but this is what we use at least for GBIF as a framework, because it shows somehow that there is a column, there is a request, and very quickly a request turns into a data availability question, which then determines how you are going to analyze it, and hopefully you will create something new, a new answer, a new solution for either a scientific problem or something that's more policy related. I think if we look at now, using mailing lists is a very easy way of doing things, but there's information technology already out there for some time, and especially now initiatives like GBIF and LifeWatch are seriously looking at how can we deploy ICT technology in such a way that it makes our life easier, and we can actually do our research, our analysis faster, and we can find each other faster. That type of thinking up till now I miss a little bit, so I want to just flag that nowadays we have different ways of communicating with each other. Now, e-science capabilities sort of dealing where IPBES is dealing with the science policy interface. This is clearly dealing, for one, with the data science interface. It's also dealing with how to attract people together in a collaborative way. And I think that the e-science is at this point in time really looking and what is the way to bring biodiversity and ecosystem researchers together, and how does that relate to a knowledge, a network of knowledge, and how together do you make a virtual platform where you can analyze data and come up with scenarios for biodiversity trends and management more easily. Now, about the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, it's been out there for about 10 years now. So if you really look at a lessons learned over 10 years, you could sort of say that GBIF went to an evolving stage of first thinking that it was a machine-to-machine question, like where's the data at? We will deploy technology and then we get that data. Then they understood that actually if you do that type of work, you need data managers. And that was totally lacking in the world, actually, that there was a way of structuring a network of data managers that are constantly busy with the data. That is what we call GBIF nodes. We work with about 57 countries, 47 organizations. And in most of these countries, there is a person or there is an organization that is actually busy with trying to find out where data is at, how it can be mobilized, and what needs to be done to get that mobilized. Now, GBIF is, on the other hand, creating all the kinds of ICT tools to publish that data. It serves at the international level to create the standards to make sure that that data can actually talk to one another. And well, it sort of shows us that it's a big task, this. And most of the times it's a big task because I made that remark earlier on this morning. We have governments funding the Secretariat, But then whether governments are actually putting investment in their national infrastructure, that is voluntarily. So we constantly are having to show to governments how important this activity is. And well, for IPBES, I mean, GBIF is very interested to deliver data sets that are aligned with IPBES assessment needs. You must realize here that GBIF is collaborating with taxonomic institutions and with other research networks here. GBIF itself does not do the analysis. It only tries to make this openly available, and that's a very important point, because I, for that part, am in this discussion in a totally different perspective than, for instance, a scientist is. We would hope that GBIF data is used in a lot of assessments, and for that we are actually have been focusing on species occurrence data for a long time, but are now really trying to get into genomic data and survey data, so monitoring and abundance data. On the other hand, LifeWatch is an upcoming European research infrastructure. It is really focused on creating virtual laboratories, so places where researchers can find data, find tools to analyze that data. Because many a times, if you look to different research groups, they actually use similar ways of treating their data, and over and over and over, people are reinventing the wheel. But actually, to have one common infrastructure that does that type of work, that is a vision that LifeWatch has. So currently, for instance, just to give you an idea, LifeWatch is very much busy with creating workflows, so how you can bring your data into a workflow so that you get automated analysis for some standard questions, for instance. And we think that type of activity could be, on the long run, also very beneficial to a network of knowledge. And well, currently there are several countries interested in establishing a LifeWatch as a European research infrastructure, and I think that establishment will happen at the end of this year, right? If I'm correct, yeah. So just to flag this, there are actually many experiences already from a research infrastructure point of view for many of the discussions that have been here, and we think these research infrastructures have something to offer for a network of knowledge in Europe.
I just have to do one click now. So, oh, wrong direction. Because we are coming right away to GeoBon, and well, as Rob has been heavily involved in GeoBon, he's much better person to speak about it than me.
Okay, GeoBon. GeoBon is part of GEO, and GEO is the Group on Earth Observations, has been set up after the Sustainability Summit in 2002, initiated by the G8, and actually it is a voluntary global cooperation in getting data available and interacting on the 9 social benefit areas, such as climate, but also ecosystems and biodiversity. So biodiversity is one of them, and GeoBon actually is started in 2005 as a community of practice on biodiversity observations globally. And why is this? Well, what is what you want? You see this scheme, there are a number of users, let's say the clients, but these are the decision makers nationally, internationally, the large conventions, the conservation organizations, and what we want to harmonize. We don't collect the things ourselves. We are just a steering group of 12 people from over the globe. We want to take care that data are being collected and be harmonized on ecosystem data, geospatial data, not only the species, but also the link of biodiversity with the land cover information that does exist and is not fit for our purposes. It's just too coarse, it has wrong legends, it has not a good interpretation of the reflectance data. So we want to have that better organized and to serve, for instance, in Europe, GMES. We try to bring together the red data lists to climate data, socioeconomic information, and very important are facilities like GBIF, LifeWatch, Darwin Core, all kind of initiatives that collect the species data and set up the infrastructures that are needed. But that's most of Europe or North America. And what we want to do is to link Asia, to link Africa, to link South America, etc. Because the Living Planet Index is for 80% consisting of European and North American data. And the rest is the rest of the world. And that's what we call the Living Planet Index. So it's not true, not yet. And so we have to do things for that. So what we do actually is we want to add a value like LifeWatch and like GWF do. We want to add value to the ongoing biodiversity observation activities. We want to build a framework, a robust framework for observations. We made, for instance, a global certification of 1 kilometer grids. That's available for everyone. That's for the terrestrial, sorry, not for the marine. But that's available at least for the terrestrial part. You can use it. You can make it and you can build your observation systems. It has been used in Himalaya to link India, Nepal and China because there are 3 totally different systems. If you have a common system, you can do it. We hope to coordinate the data gathering and delivery by making standards, because we need standards. We cannot have a report for the CBD on totally different elements. Like our reports on Article 17 for the Habitats and Species Directive is rubbish because we don't have a standardized data sets. And you're spoiling a lot of money if you don't do that. And we don't have so much money for biodiversity observation and the biodiversity monitoring. We want to come to global products, and we are working on it. The genome activities are, for instance, very important. We are advocating continuity and of data supply, serving and making use of what GBIF, among others, or CRIA in Brazil are doing, and the data sharing is very important. And we built that community of practice of terrestrial, freshwater and marine observers, because if we are not doing it together, if we don't know each other, and that's also what this Biodiversity Knowledge Hub is trying to do, if we don't come together and know each other and don't exchange, if we not form the community of practice, then it will not work. And that it has impact, you can see, because the CBD already asked Geobond to do an assessment of the observation capabilities of their targets. That's what we have done, and it then asked, well, could you help us, because there are essential climate variables, could you help us to do something on, is it possible? The ocean community also wants essential ocean variables. Could you say something general about essential biodiversity variables that we can link, so that we can link observations globally? Well, we're working on that, and I think it's a way of thinking that you can do things together, but you have to build that community and build all the standards and harmonization procedures. I think that's a message also for Europe. Okay.
So thanks a lot, Olaf and Rob, for this intervention on making clear of what on the science side is already happening. I think it's a very, very important additional information. So let me try to summarize this a little bit from my starting point I described to you regarding the community of interest. I'm coming back to that figure because most of these elements where we have a developing community of practice, they are basically, either more on the science or on the policy side. We have what we've learned about Geobond, GBIF, LifeWatch. They are basically, of course, here in the community of practice side, on the science side. And when it comes to the descriptions that we had from BISE and from BIP, of course, they are, well, somehow there, of course, are some scientific science elements in it, but they are more, well, request-driven from the practice side. And but on the other side, if we are really thinking about which kind of science policy interfaces in the very core of science policy interface work have been successful, then we have to go for another way. Because they have quite different approaches. We have to be aware of that. So I try to summarize them a little bit. We have in science, we of course have this this networking model where people just get together because they have a common interest. EPBRS is an example for that, where high personal commitment is needed. We have institutional collaboration models where just, well, for different reasons, institutions find themselves together to really follow a specific goal, but then of course they are more institutionalized. They need clearer administrative structures, and this is sometimes very challenging, I know, from the setting up of LifeWatch as far as I remember. But in practice, of course, they have another viewpoint of how they get to that. It's sometimes just the need for a joint database or information model. And there are already a community of practice there for many, many years between the EU member states, which is IONET, where they regularly meet from the national to the European level to think about environmental data standards and so on. And on the other hand, of course, more and more, also when we come to citizen science and so on, we have more and more open contribution models, which are just for engagement of communities like Eye on Earth. And of course, you have high needs and standards of NIT approaches in that. So there you have different ideas for that, but of course all of them have similar challenges when it comes to funding and continuity. And basically, they are really a community of practice rather than a community of interest. They are really focusing on the need from the practice or on the science side. And even more, developing that together is the challenge. And when we think about which models have been successful in terms of really doing, if you like, cutting-edge science policy interface work, then I would say, looking back over the last 5 to 10 years, besides IPCC, we have the Millennium Assessment, which was very, very influential. We have TEEP, which was to some extent influential as well. But what the difference from the MA was, and what also looking back at TEEP was, is that it really, really brought together different kinds of communities. It brought together, the MA brought together this people coming from the biodiversity, natural sciences, much more with the social sciences, thinking about what actually is the benefit of ecosystems to human well-being. So this was a new, innovative approach, more on the science side, I would say, today. And TEEP brought together this additional economic perspective into that and brought in very many practitioners into that and finding a common ground of working on the science policy interface. So when we are now thinking about designing something in Europe, we have to think about, well, what elements could really bring us together from these different perspectives of science and practice to really come into that situation that we create such impacting elements. And IPBES, of course, hopefully will be a trigger for that. That on the global level, it might be help in bridging these communities. And of course, we have to think about on the European perspective how to do that. I showed the slide yesterday. We have to think about on a regional level how to support this global level of biodiversity work from the regional perspective and building a community of interest there. The second point, of course, is how to use and link IT approaches. We raised this already several times, thinking about, can we link this up to the biodiversity information system? Can we use such social networking approaches? There's a question mark on purpose here, like ResearchGate. I don't know if you know about this. I have the impression that more and more people from our community get into that, which is simply an exchange platform for scientists and nothing more, but nevertheless very, very valuable. Or can we include other communities of practice, as we have seen here from the examples from Olaf and Rob? And content-wise, we have to get back still on this communication problem of this, bridging this symmetry of ignorance between the practitioner side and the science side. Because although we have many, many people, I think especially in this room, who are working on it regularly and don't have a problem, we still have, on the larger, broader scope of scientists and practice, we still have this challenge. And of course, we have to think about what kind of products we actually are going to invest in. We have not so much focus this year on the prototype, but reports can just be one example. And I'm coming here back to one product which I like from the tea perspective, which is just a best practice collection, where we used, for example, via EEA, we used the Eye on Earth thing, where you just have a map of all these needles there, and underneath one of these needles there is a peer-reviewed 2 to 3 pages test case or case study in the TEEP context, where TEEP approaches were used on the local level. And what is still needed here is a database. This is currently under development so that you can search not only by geographic region, but also by, for example, ecosystem or something like that. But these are new forms of products where we have to think about to better link science and practice in the future. So that's all from my side at the moment. I'm pretty sure that there are many, many other elements. I would be very happy to discuss this with you together in one of the breakout groups, because I think that besides thinking about prototype work and well, designing large reports, it's very important that we think about also of how to really develop in the midterm a community of interest which really helps society on biodiversity issues. Thank you.